Okay, to talk about factoring, we really need to review multiplying binomials since it's the opposite. So let's do a quick example here. Let's do the difference of a number in 5 times the sum of a number in 3. Okay, many of you do it by foiling. First times first here, that's x squared. Multiply it by the outer, that's positive 3x. Take your second term, do the inners, negative 5x, and then the last, negative 5 times 3, negative 15. Now remember, the middle term should be able to be combined. So 3x and negative 5x is negative 2x. This is not going to be combined with anything, neither is the negative 15. Okay? So when we're factoring, what we're going to actually do is go from a trinomial back to the product of two binomials. To do that, I want you to notice where we get these numbers. The negative 15, I got that last term by multiplying the negative 5 and the 3. So the two numbers in the parentheses, their product times will give you the last term. Now how did I get the middle term? That came from the inner and outer. And what we did is combine them. We added them. So negative 5 plus 3 gave us negative 2. So the middle term came from the sum of the two numbers inside the parentheses. So keeping that in mind, let's try one where we are moving backwards. We're going to factor. Okay, let's leave that right there so we can see where we get our numbers. Okay, the first example I'm going to give you is x squared minus 7x plus 12. Okay? Now, the first thing I do, actually always I need to ask myself when factoring, do I have a greatest common monomial factor? Is there something that I can divide each term by? In this situation, my coefficient here is 1. I don't have a variable here, so I'm not going to be able to divide this by anything. So if it's a trinomial, the next thing I try is, can I break this down into two binomials? Well, to get x squared, that comes from x times x. Now remember, the last term is going to come from the product of the two numbers in the parentheses. So I'm going to go through and look at my factors of 12. 1 times 12 gives me 12. 2 times 6 gives me 12. 3 times 4 gives me 12. And next would be 4, but I've got it up here, so I know I've covered them all. Now, before I start figuring out which number it is, I'm going to decide what my signs are. To multiply to multiply and get a positive, I either have two positives, a positive times a positive is positive, or two negatives. A negative times a negative is positive. So I have two choices. To decide which one it is, I want to look at the sum, the middle term. Well, if the middle term is negative, this must be two negatives. Two negatives are going to multiply to be a positive and add up to be a negative. Okay, so because the signs are the same, I then know that I am literally looking for the sum. Which one of these add up to 7? 1 times 12, 13. 2 and 6, that would be 8. 3 and 4, there it is, the 7. So, and they're both negative, so the order is not going to matter. If you have x minus 4 times x minus 3, the difference of x and 4 and x and 3 here, that's okay, because commutative property of multiplication says these binomials, the order is not going to matter. Okay. And you can multiply it back out or use your calculator to check. These should be equivalent. When you're factoring, the original problem and your factor should be equivalent. So you could store any number in for x and make sure that the two expressions are equivalent. Okay, let's try one more example. Let's do 5x squared. Let's see what I want to do here. Sorry. We'll do, let's do this. Positive 5x minus 100. Okay, so as always, I'm going to ask myself, do I have a common monomial factor? This time I do. Look at all these. I can divide them all by 5. So remember, I'm factoring, I'm doing the opposite of multiplying, so I'm doing the opposite of the distributive property right now. Excuse me. What can I divide this by? I'm sorry, when I divide this by 5, what do I get? Okay, 5 times x squared is 5x squared. When I divide the middle term by 5, I get positive 1x. 5 times x, 5x. And when I divide the last term by 5, I get negative 20. 5 times negative 20, negative 100. Okay, so I'm looking at what's left in parentheses, and I want to see, can I go any further? I've got a trinomial again. Leading coefficient here is 1. Okay, so I'm going to try what I did in the last one. I'm going to try to break it up into 2 binomials. Okay, to get x squared, that would be x times x. I'm going to look at my products. Remember the product, the last term comes from the product, so the product of these should be 20. So 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 3 does not work, 4 times 5, and now that the next would be 5, so I'm finished here. Okay, my signs is what I want to decide first. If I multiply product, if I multiply to get a negative number, there's only one thing this could be. One of them is positive and one is negative. It does not matter if you put the negative here or the negative here. It does not matter. Okay? Now, if the signs are different, when I take their sum, I'm actually subtracting them. I'm finding the difference between them. So I'm looking for the difference of these to be a positive 1. So the difference between 1 and 20 is 19. The difference between 2 and 10 is 8. The difference between 4 and 5 is 1. Now, the last thing I have to ask myself is, which one is positive and which one is negative? Well, if my middle term is positive, when I added these, the one that I had more of was positive. So my larger one will be positive. So in this case, the 5. 5 will be positive and the 4 will be negative. Again, I can multiply this back out to check it, or let me show you one on the calculator, what I mean by checking with the calculator. Okay, to check this with the calculator, it doesn't matter what I put in for x. Okay, I like to put pi, because pi is an irrational number, so I'm not going to have a coincidence. Okay, I don't know what x is, but what I do know is that my original problem, when I write it in factored form, right here, it should be equivalent. So I'm going to put in the original problem, 5x squared plus 5x minus 100. Find out what that is, leave it up there so I can see it, and then I'm going to put in my final answer. 5 parentheses x plus 5 parentheses parentheses x minus 4. Okay, and they are equivalent. So because they are the same, I know that I have factored correctly. Now, there's a chance that I did not factor completely, but I'm looking at what's left here. I've got a number outside. There's only a binomial here, I cannot go any further. So I am finished.